Hello, everyone, and welcome to Instagram Live with myself, Christina, and Simran. We're going to be discussing ancestral healing and reclamation. So I'm just going to give Simran a little bit of time to hop on. And I'm just going to pin the topic, the subject here. Give me 1 second. Hi, Simran. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic today because ancestral healing and reclamation of my ancestral gifts has been such a pivotal part of my journey, personally and professionally, and has kind of changed the way that I interact with myself, with the world around me, and also with my family. And this concept of connecting with our ancestors, it's something that every single person used to do once upon a time. All of your ancestors had an ancestral connection practice as part of their rituals. And it's something that we've kind of been severed from and have lost connection to in modern day life. Hold on, there's Simran again. And there's a lot of wisdom as to why it's so important. And there's also science as to why ancestral healing is important. Hi, Simran.
Hi. Hi.
Hello. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin the topic. There we go. Awesome. Welcome.
Hello.
How are
So
you?
excited to be doing this with you finally.
I know. Finally, we did it. Took us a little bit of time. We've been talking about this for such a long time.
Finally. So excited.
Me too.
So I know you're doing Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what is kind of the wish, the greeting that you say to people on Ramadan, because I don't know how to actually wish people for Ramadan. So what is the way we wish people?
So you could say Ramadan Kareem. Kareem is like the most generous. It's one of the divine names. We have 99 divine names, which are attributes that we try to possess and embody, which are attributes of Allah. So Kareem is about generosity, the most generous. So we say Ramadan Kareem, which is about like wishing someone a really generous Ramadan. And then there's Ramadan Mubarak, and you can use them both interchangeably. Ramadan Mubarak means to have a blessed Ramadan. So either are great. I love the Kareem one because it's a little bit, it's not like known as much by people outside Islam, I think. And also like there's just a sweetness to it about the generosity. It's so beautiful.
So for everyone who is doing Ramadan, I'm wishing you all a beautiful Ramadan Kareem, especially now, and sending out prayers of peace for all those in Gaza and all of those in need, all of those who are suffering throughout the world. May you be blessed. May you be given all the joys and fruits of this world and this earth abundantly. And let's just allow this to happen now, so that all human suffering and the fight for freedom can finally be materialized in this realm. So Christina, I'm excited. Let's talk about why we wanted to have this discussion around ancestral healing and why we believe that it's important to do it now, especially.
So I'm a variety of different ethnicities and cultures, and I'm also a third culture kid because I live between the US and Europe. And on one side of my family, I have white heritage with Native American. On the other side, I have indigenous from Nicaragua, France, and Spain. So growing up, part of my challenge and what I struggled with is that I was really ashamed and embarrassed of being part Nicaraguan and being Latina because of some of the conditioning that I experienced in America and also in Europe. So I hid it for a very long time. And then when I befriended one of my best friends to this day, when I was about, I think 13 or 14, she called me out. She's like, "What did you say your background was?" And she's like, "Are you sure you don't have indigenous or like Latino in there at all?" And I was like, "No, I don't." I was very defensive. And then she came to my house one day to hang out after school, and she's like, your dad is definitely indigenous. We got to talk. And I was like, okay, fine. I lied. I was embarrassed. And she's like, what? Don't be embarrassed of that. You should embrace that. And we had a whole talk together. She's Moroccan. So she also has part, you know, indigenous Amazigh, or what's known as like Berber. And her, so we had a beautiful talk about that. And that, I think, was step one of me starting to acknowledge that I had this like self-hatred and that I wasn't fully embracing parts of myself. And that started me off on a long journey that, you know, I took pauses with. It started helping me like really admit to myself what I had been subject to in modern life, which is essentially white supremacy, you know, and colonialism. Yeah. And then this has been like a gradual journey. When I lived in Greece for 10 years throughout my 20s, I started to eat completely Mediterranean foods, which that's a huge part of my ancestral diet, and started to see huge changes in my emotions, like even my hair, my skin, my body. And that also took me like a level deeper, and then starting to look, like, research and learn about my ancestral rituals and their way of communing with the earth. That helped me like reveal another layer. And then I started working specifically with Native American and Latina indigenous healers, mystics, and seers on developing some of my ancestral gifts. And that's when things really escalated for me. And then in 2020, when everything was happening with Black Lives Matter, I was living in Singapore, and I was going through a big, one of many spiritual openings. I hate using the word awakening because I think our whole life is an awakening. But one of my openings, what happened is I started to have dreams of my ancestors who were colonized, and, you know, Native Americans and indigenous in Nicaragua, as well as those who were the colonizers, the perpetrators. So my white Spanish ancestors, because actually the slave movement came from Spain 500 years ago. It was the Spanish that started this. And just having very vivid dreams about what happened. And this started me on a whole journey. And at the time, I didn't have a teacher to guide me through it. It was all intuitively led. And at the time, I really wish I had someone who could support me and help me. But everything happens as it's meant to be. And I'm grateful it unfolded as it did, because now I have my own lens and way of approaching this without being influenced by others. I know there's other people out here who do that work too, but mine's uniquely my own. So it gave me more agency, right? And accountability. And essentially what helped me get through that is a lot of deep surrender, a lot of grieving, a lot of different rituals around journaling, praying, meditating, singing, sound meditation, breath work, specifically aimed at processing and then releasing and integrating ancestral trauma that I realized was stored in my DNA. And then on the other side of that process lied a deep reclamation of ancestral gifts. So it allowed my gifts to be fully, you know, brought to the surface, and completely embraced in a beautiful way. And for me, I've done a lot of work on myself over the years, whether that's like healing work or whether that's more like therapy work, like in the mind, or somatic work in the body. But for me, the most healing of all of the work that I have ever done and the most liberating was my ancestral work. So that's my long-winded response.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that, because maybe there are people who don't even know about your heritage. I share a similar journey, although of different ethnicity. And, you know, my mom actually used to blame me of being a coconut, you know, brown on the outside and totally white on the inside. And I totally kind of just dismissed that. And it's only actually with this whole war in Palestine, which I know has been going on for actually over 100 years, that I actually realized that what she was saying is true. And so we can get deeper into my story a little bit later, but I just want to continue a little bit with you and talk about, you were talking about your gifts, and you were talking about how going through the shadows and actually having also done Western therapy, because, you know, a lot of people are in our audience are white. A lot of us have been brought up in the, let's say, the white imperialist system without even being aware of what that is. And we'll get into that. But how would you say therapy is different from the kind of offering that you're talking about, the kind of work that you've done, that we're thinking that we are going to be offering people? How is it different, and why should people care, especially people of color?
So for therapy, one, it's a Western concept that's created under a colonial and white supremacist framework. So that's also very interesting. So it's not going to take into account a lot of the different aspects of, for example, racism, or for example, collective trauma, as opposed to, in addition, epigenetic trauma, which is trauma that's stored in our DNA. And working through ancestral trauma is truly an Indigenous practice. And I say that because they are the ones that conceptualize this, and they are the ones that never lost touch with it. And a lot of people that write about collective and ancestral trauma and epigenetic and intergenerational trauma are writing about it because they spent time studying with the Indigenous. And a lot of the times it's appropriated. They don't actually give the Indigenous credit for it. To be honest with you, even Freud, his concept of the shadow, along with many other, or maybe it was Carl Jung, the shadow, but either way, in Western psychology, the concept of the shadow was appropriated from the Indigenous. Mm-hmm. They spent time studying with the Indigenous. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting. So they've taken these concepts, but they've taken them out of the context of the web of life. They've just extracted bits and pieces without looking at their interconnectivity. And mm-hmm. so the thing is with Western psychology is it just looks at us as like a mind, right? That we're just a brain, we're just a mind, it's all in your head. But we are holistic beings that are equal layers of mind, body, and spirit. So what about the body? What about the memory that's stored in the body? What about the trauma that's stored physically in our fascia and our connective tissues? Mm. What about the fact that we see chronic pain being passed down generation after generation? The same exact, like, my dad has a bad right knee, for example. I have a bad right knee, not me, just, hypothetically. Right. And my grandfather did too. What's that about? What does the right knee represent? Oh, that's on, the masculine side of the body. What's the issue in the paternal lineage? What does the right knee represent? Does it represent connection to the womb, to the reproductive glands? So we start to look at like more of these ancient and Indigenous associations with body parts. And then we can work backwards and start to understand what the trauma was and where it comes from. And, this isn't woo-woo at all. It's scientifically backed. Ancestral healing and the concept of trauma being inherited and intergenerational. And the field of epigenetics is what proves this. Mm-hmm. And it's very relevant to what's going on now between Israel and Palestine, because I believe none of this would be happening really to this scale if Jews had done deep ancestral healing work. Because it's not just the Holocaust that they went through, which was atrocious. There was so many events before that took place. For centuries, Jews have experienced persecution. Mm-hmm. And so they've inherited a huge backlog and like an avalanche of ancestral trauma. But the way that this healing modality works is it's stored in the gene, but it's stored in a part of the gene that you can turn on or you can turn off. So we have agency, we have freedom, we have the ability to transmute that work, right, and to feel that, catharsis on the other side of it. And, there's a saying in Indigenous belief systems and philosophies that there's always one person in the DNA that's picked to heal it and to release it. And chances are, if you're on this live, you're watching it now or you're watching it as a replay, it's likely to be you, because I believe a lot of us in this day and age that are incarnated at this time are meant to be doing this work. A lot of us are very intuitive, very sensitive, and it's generally the intuitive and sensitive ones that are drawn to it and that pick up on it. And you're also the most skilled and gifted and able to do this work. And they say once you do this work, you heal the lineage 7 generations forward, but also 7 generations back. So it's an incredible offering to your ancestors living and your ancestors that have passed and your future descendants.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And also when you were talking about Western therapy, although I have actually not done a lot of Western therapy, I think I tried one session once in my 20s. I was like, I knew this was not going deep enough for me. It was always asking questions, going back into the same story. So you're kind of stuck in the same cycle and re-traumatizing yourself a lot of the times. So it's also this thing for me, what I found, and everyone has their own experience, is kind of being dependent on someone to help you all the time. Like your psychologist, your therapist, it's kind of like you're saving. You need to keep going back, otherwise you're going to kind of drift backwards. And you're never really empowered to actually get out of this healing cycle. Mm-hmm. And it's also very individually focused, whereas ancestors, the collective, the tribe, ancient cultures have always talked about the collective. And if there's one person in the collective that is diseased in any way, it's actually a problem with the collective. And it's up to the collective to help that individual come back into integration. So for me, I find this ancestral work acknowledging actually what's in your epigenetics, looking at the shadows, free from the light and love spirituality that is very new age, right. That I have to say I fell into that trap for many years, only now to discover that if you're not actually looking at the shadow, if you're not looking at the illnesses within society and in a broader brush that is really talking about the history of colonialism, talking about the history of imperialism and oppression, and actually exploitation, repression, which is what our current society, the capitalist, especially late stage capitalism, is built on. And so without looking at these shadows and acknowledging where we are today, understanding where it came from, we can't hope to move forward. And as you rightly said, the whole thing right now, which is really, I feel like you don't like the word awakening, let's just use it for now. This, I would say, global awakening with what's happening in Palestine and Gaza, which because of the horrific nature of it in our lifetime, at least, I think it's really getting people's attention. Mm-hmm. And I know you've said many times that the Palestinian soul, the Palestinian spirit, especially those in Gaza right now, that have a very important, heavy soul mission, because they're here to really show the collective of what a lot has been repressed, including people of color, including people who are indigenous, because we have not been aware of our own suppression. Yeah. And so I know we've chatted before, whereas I think a lot of work actually has to happen within, let's say, the colonizers, the Zionist movement, which is actually not about religion or Judaism. It's been hijacked. Racial theories have been taken, which is actually just another way to exploit. And racial theories, as you've spoken about also in the past, have just been used as a way to manipulate people. This theory of hierarchy of races, which is based on nothing. But it's what a lot of our society for the last hundreds, at least 500 years, has been built upon. And our current systems, all of the ways that imperialism is still sustained to this day, where the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, inequality is increasing. And as we're seeing this inequality increase, there's also in the collective more of a separation from self. So what's happening in the collective, we also see within ourselves, because we're so far removed from our essence. And as you rightly said, a lot of Western therapy is based on the mind. Yeah, you might do some somatic work, which is also quite recent, actually. Yeah. You might do some somatic work, but unless you understand the depths of perhaps some of the traumas that your ancestors went through, you won't actually consciously be aware of why certain patterns are happening in your life. And that's why we want to talk about ancestral healing in this time, because as we see in the that the Jewish people have been through over the centuries, which is totally valid. That trauma has now become victimhood, where the victims are now the perpetrators of yet another, I would say, ethnic cleansing, another genocide. So another thing that I'd love to discuss is, for me, the people that really need it, right, are the people who I would say are doing the oppression. And you brought something very important up with, there are plenty of people even within the BIPOC groups, the colored groups, the indigenous groups, that actually don't even know we're being repressed, like I didn't know. So what would you say as to who are the people ripe for this kind of work right now?
Well, I think the people you refer to as like more like coconuts, I think this is like the perfect type of offering and work for them, because it helps them start to identify how the systems that are in place have infiltrated their subconscious mind and their programming, sometimes subtly, other times overtly. And it's essentially like a malware that's running in our psyche. And it not only in our psyche, it's in our body. And we're unaware of it until we become aware of it. Like I'm still to this day, like, and especially since I moved back to the States about a year and a half ago, becoming more and more aware every day of how, even though I've started to embrace my roots and started to work through the layers of conditioning around colonialism and white supremacy, there's still very subtle ways that impact me. And also I'm more aware of observing it in other people now, which is fascinating, and then holding them accountable in a loving and compassionate way. So what it does is it helps you to start to create this relationship with yourself, with your ancestry, in a way that you're embracing it and having this like reclamation of your roots, essentially. And I always use this metaphor that if you look at a tree, right, like a flowering, beautiful tree, a tree cannot have beautiful foliage or beautiful flowers that are blossoming and are vibrant if the root has, been severed, if the root has some sort of infection, if the root has some sort of issue, right? So if we're looking at a tree and it's not flowering or blossoming so great, we have to drill down to get to like the source of where that's coming from. And many times there's an issue in the root. And so what's happened in modern day is most of us are severed from our roots. We don't know that much about our ancestors. We don't connect with our ancestors usually. We don't pray to our ancestors. We don't meditate and have reverence for our ancestors. We don't dream of them. But these are things that every single person used to have in their lineage. This is not something that's only in like indigenous people. This is something that existed in every single tribe all over the world. All of us were from tribes.
Right.
Even
Everyone
if you think you're white,
indigenous.
Everyone was. Right. Yeah, indigenous to a specific region. So it's also about understanding where your ancestors came from, who they were, what they did, like what their rituals were, what their ways of eating were, and reclaiming that. And understanding that this concept of whiteness, which is only 500 years old, there's no such thing as whiteness. It actually doesn't exist. It's a construct. And it's a way to feel superior and to dominate and oppress others. So who were you before whiteness was a construct? No matter what ethnicity you are, who were you and where did you come from? What tribe? And so this work isn't only helpful for people of color, of BIPOC, it's also incredibly helpful for white people. So they can start to become aware of how they're oppressing others and they are still contributing to these systems. There's many different terminologies that are used. Like there's actually a hierarchy, a pyramid that I just saw the other day in regards to like, it's the hierarchy of like white supremacy basically, and how white people still contribute to it to this day. And I'll share that on my stories after we finish the live and share it with you. Yeah. But it broke it down perfectly. Actually, maybe I can pull it up. But anyway, the point is that no matter who you are, this work is beneficial, because if we don't start to heal this pattern, we will continue to perpetuate it. We will continue to see genocides. We will continue to see wars. We will continue to see suffering and racism. And we have to feel it in order to heal it. we have to take accountability for being the ones that end this within our lifetime, because otherwise history keeps repeating itself. We keep seeing that. Like it's not getting better, it's getting worse, in my opinion. And the way that it works is signs are going to start out really subtle and soft, and the more and more we ignore them, the louder and more intense they're going to get. And I think truly that's what's happening now with what's going on in Gaza, is that it's just getting louder and more intense, and it's a wake-up call. And like you said, Palestinians have a huge soul mission. They signed up for a very heavy soul contract. But I do believe that they are some of the most advanced, wise souls that this planet has ever seen, for so many reasons. It's become very clear to me the amount of grace that they have, the amount of faith that they have, even when everything's been taken away from them, the way that they just are able to embrace taqwa, which is God consciousness, no matter what is happening to them in the physical earthly realm, is something that has really shown me how much work I have to do on myself. And I think for everyone, I really invite you to reflect on that, to witness how they've handled what's going on. And, you know, I feel that in a way, like, I hate this term, but it's, I think the easiest way to describe it is, in a way, they've become these like sort of like, they're martyrs, and they're sort of these like sacrificial lambs, in the sense that they've decided to sacrifice their life and dedicate their whole soul mission to awakening the planet. And I'm fine with awakening on a collective level. It's more about the personal level. I'm not down with that word, because it creates the spiritual ego, I've noticed. Like, I've awakened and you haven't. We're all awakening. But collectively, there is absolutely a huge awakening happening, and a huge unifying effort through what's happening in Palestine. And for me, I have so much anger, so much grief coming through around this, which is, of course, because it's horrible, but it's also activating my own ancestral trauma, my own ancestral grief, my own ancestral rage around genocides that were imposed on my ancestors, and around genocides that my ancestors, my European ancestors, perpetrated. So there's so much happening within me that, I realize that this is happening to so many people, regardless of their background or what ethnicity they are. They're having their ancestral trauma activated through what's happening. And in that lies the gift and the invitation. And also, like, this is our responsibility. Like, let's fully work through this in this lifetime, and let's then be the ripple effect to spread this out to our communities and to people that we love and that we care about, to help them do this work as well, and sort of like be the example, right? And lead that way.
Absolutely. What came up for me while you were speaking was that, number one, a lot of us are mixed ethnicity, right? And within our veins, especially if you've done any intuitive training, you will know that there's a clash of civilizations within our DNA. So there's going to be aspects of ourselves in our ancestry through the lineage that have been at war with each other. So if you sometimes feel like there are parts of you that just don't make sense, and there's of course this anger, and sometimes you might be aware that it's due to some genocide or oppression, but at other times it could just be much more subtle, where you are actually being oppressed in your daily life and you don't feel safe to speak up. And those are ways that especially people who have, let's say, been brought up in ex-colonies, a lot of them are actually behaving like the colonizers within their own communities. So there's caste systems, there's inequality, actually very much within places that have been colonized. So that's another way that, a lot of people who are, let's say, colored might feel like, oh, I don't need to do it because it happened to me. But actually you do, because you're not always aware of the systems of oppression that you've kind of just taken on as this is the way the world is. And this is some of the ways that we want to help with awakening you to perhaps subtle systems of oppression that you're buying into and perpetrating, or you might feel like totally unsafe to speak out. And this is actually as a result of living in an imperialist colonial system. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And also another thing on this concept of whiteness, what I've noticed and been very disappointed, sad about, is how there are so many people in the wellness, let's call it the Western wellness, which has actually become global wellness uh, industry, where people are totally silent.
Yeah.
And that could be because they don't want to lose their income streams, they don't want to lose clients, they want to be light and love. But actually, in remaining in this bubble of light and love, and I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing, and I'm not getting political, not being political in a time when there's actually swathes of children, innocents dying, not dying, being killed, means that actually you are okay with it. And I just want to talk about this for a little bit, because there's so many people that I have physically unfollowed, who I've stopped working with, people who I used to see as mentors, people who are totally silent. And I'm very sorry to say that it is actually mostly amongst my Western friends, white friends, let's say.
Yep.
And as much as I love them, and I don't judge them because everyone has their own soul mission, but it definitely makes me feel a little bit alienated when you can, let's say, for example, see the suffering of Ukrainians, which is horrible, and not be able to say the same thing about Palestinians, about Congolese, about Sudanese, about the other genocides that are happening in the world. And actually, I have to say, Palestine woke me up to a lot of these other genocides that we don't even speak about. And I feel like suddenly the global south is rising, actually because it has to, because I feel like society, humanity, this planet has reached a tipping point. And this tipping point is where there's so much injustice going on in the world, basically of exploitation of resources is what it comes down to. And the fact that certain people, mostly in Western Europe and North America, feel like they have carte blanche to go and exploit countries of the global south. And we're gradually seeing a shift, but I feel like unless, to be honest, the white people don't start waking up, I feel we're going to have a much, much longer road to travel. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that and what you're noticing in your community, in your forums, about actually the white people coming on board. And there are a lot. So I would like to say there are a lot of people, including a lot of Jewish people, that are standing up against Zionism. And I'm so grateful for that, because I believe that really, that's really powerful, because actually that's where it's currently showing up in the world.
Right. And if, the thing is what I've noticed generally, and this is a sign of white supremacy, being alive and well, is that most white people will only listen to what's happening in Israel and Palestine from another white person or from a Jewish person.
Right.
That in itself is a great, little proof of concept as white supremacy being, embedded in the fabric.
Right, because they want it to be a source, and invariably they want that source to be a white source, a Western source.
From a Muslim or an Arab, they like, we can't trust them. So that's also another thing we can talk about. We can't trust them. Why? Because we've been indoctrinated to have bias and prejudice and racism towards Arabs and Muslims. Literally, there's black and white movies I've seen, which I think were like from the 30s or 40s. I'm not sure the exact year, but I remember the Arabs being depicted as sneaky and dirty and like evil. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, this is a lot far, like this goes into my grandparents' generation. I thought the indoctrination had just started from the 80s, from the Gulf Wars and stuff, in the 90s. But going back to what you said originally about the silence and within the white spiritual community generally, this I really started to notice from 2020, and I started to pick up on performative activism too, around Black Lives Matter with it. And I already started my journey of like unfollowing people that were white and new age from then. And there were so many things that started happening where I started to kind of see that and pick up on that. And now what's happened with this genocide in Palestine has only taken that to another level. Yes, essentially there's a pyramid of white supremacy. at the top is mass murder, which is what we see in Palestine. Then there's violence, which is lynching, hate crimes, police brutality. By the way, we see that in Palestine and also in many other countries in the world. And by the way, we still see it in America. So that's like the second type. Yeah.
We're seeing it in the Western world. Literally, they talk about democracy and spreading values, but actually they're creating a genocide in real time.
100%. And it's gaslighting, because it's like, oh, we're sending hundreds of billions in arms and in funding to Israel, but then we're going to send a few little puny aid packets to Palestine, which, by the way, have killed people because the
5 months later,
deploy.
5 months later.
I'm just like, oh my God, that's like your abuser beating the crap out of you and then being like, here's a Band-Aid. No, thank you. Anyway, so we have mass murder, then we have violence as the second level of the pyramid. The third level is calls for violence. So that's like groups mobilizing, such as KKK or neo-Nazis or, burning flags or crosses or what have you. And by the way, we see that happening, the rise of right-wing governments, the rise of more like neo-Nazi groups happening all over the world. It happened when I was in Greece with a group there called the Krisi Avgi, which means the Golden Dawn. I watched it happen, which was nuts, because also Greeks are part Turkish from a 500-year occupation, so they're not even white. So that's interesting. And then we see it happen. Look at Trump. The fact that Trump was even voted into office, like, wow, he really highlighted and brought to the surface the collective shadow around white supremacy. And he's awful and he's horrible. But in a way, I'm glad, because I think it really shocked people and revealed so much that was suppressed around white supremacy. I don't like Trump. I don't endorse him. Not a fan. But in a way, I'm glad, because I think it started this conversation and helping people become aware, because we thought we were past it when we had Obama as president, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
So
talking about politics, I 100% agree with you. And I just wanted to bring this up quickly because you're talking about politics and parties and Trump and the rise of right-wing governments actually across the world. It's happening in India. It's happening in Western Europe. If you just look at what's happening in the elections, right-wing parties are coming to power, no matter what they're saying, with Islamophobe politicians in the United Kingdom, which is another topic. But we're kind of seeing that it's okay for Zionists, it's okay for Western politicians to talk about a mob, right? Talking about Islam, talking about the brown person who you should be scared about, dehumanizing the colored person, and at the same time, bombing the life out of them. So
to justify it.
Totally. It's this complete cognitive dissonance where what we're actually seeing happen in real life, who are the real perpetrators of terror? Are they really the terrorist groups that they've declared just because they declare them? So just because you've declared someone a terrorist group, who says that they're a terrorist group? In whose eyes are they a terrorist group? So it's just this blanket statement, these blanket legalistic, moralistic terms that actually mean very little, because who are the real perpetrators of the violence, the insane violence that we're seeing right now? Actually, it's not the Palestinians, it's not Hamas, right?
No.
So it's, again, these words that they declare, they've been declared a terrorist organization. By whom? Right? Who says that your standards are the standards that everyone has to adopt? So I think it's also the terminology, especially in the media, that we're just brainwashed with, barraged with all the time, that even people of color start to say, oh, but do you condemn blah, blah, blah? Well, no, because I didn't declare them. Who declared them? Who declared that they were a terrorist group? One person's terrorist group is another person's freedom fighter. And who gives you the right to say who we should believe is the freedom fighter? So I think doing work like this, shadow work, understanding where our current systems come from, and really they came from colonialism, and colonialism is alive and well. By understanding and deconstructing this, we get to choose with more awareness where we stand. And I guess this is really why we're launching this course. Do you want to talk a little bit about the course, when we're launching, what it's going to look like?
Yeah, I do, but I want to finish the pyramid thing because I just realized we got off topic.
Yeah,
as we do.
Usual.
Okay, So yeah, I'm like, wait, I forgot about that because I want to bring it back to the New Age spirituality thing too.
Sure.
So mass murder, violence calls for violence. Then there's discrimination, which is racial profiling, which we see happening on an institutional level, obviously, but also like there's studies of people when they see a Black person walking down the street, at night they cross the street. This is a very common phenomenon, and Black friends of mine have crazy stories about that still happens to this day. So racial profiling, mass incarceration, hi America, racial slurs, fears of person of color, like generalizing and stereotypes, anti-immigration policies. Then we have veiled racism. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. And we're only at that's like the 5th level of the pyramid. We still have 2 more to go. So veiled racism is victim blaming, racist jokes, Eurocentric curriculum, tokenism, cultural appropriation, and racist icons. Very prevalent. Then we have minimization, which is the white savior complex. This I really want people to start to understand because this is a huge way in which white supremacy is upheld. I'm not racist. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm helping them. This is big. This is such a little ego trap. It's wild and a great way of hiding the shadow. So, but it's not all white people. It wasn't me. I didn't own slaves. Not believing POC's experiences, denial of white privilege. Oh, this one. I'm not privileged. I'm from a poor family. I'm like, it's not about just the economic conditions. It's literally about your skin tone. Because it could be a person of color that actually comes from better economic conditions and education than someone that's white that has like worse economic conditions and education. And chances are that white person is going to get the job or get the raise or get the promotion or get treated better, just even at the grocery store. And then they talk about racism being something of the past. We're beyond that. There's no racism anymore. And believing that, but I don't act racist. It's not me. And then lastly, which is where we bring it into the white, new age spiritual community, indifference. Indifference is the 7th layer of that pyramid, which is there's 2 sides to every story. I'm not going to go there. I'm beyond that. I'm neutral. I want peace for everybody, avoiding confrontation, avoiding accountability, avoiding calling people out and holding them responsible. I'm beyond politics. Politics don't affect me. This is like a huge symptom of
this
white
is
privilege.
what I see.
It doesn't affect you.
Right. I don't want to get involved.
Yes.
There's 2 sides. Yeah.
Yes. So the fact of the matter is the indifference is one of the most violent forms of oppression and of upholding racism and systems of oppression because you're literally acting like you don't play a role in it and you're in this like symptom of avoidance, suppression, and denial as if it doesn't exist. And it's not even politics. Politics isn't how I refer to it. It's human rights. It's not like, oh, like I believe in this person's right to vote or not to vote, or I believe in this economic. No, it's about human rights and us being equal. And I think that concept people don't get involved in because it scares them because they're benefiting from someone else not having equal human rights to them. And that in itself is a huge symptom and a sign of someone upholding and contributing to white supremacy. You're contributing to white supremacy until you've done the work to not contribute and to become aware of how you do contribute, plain and simple.
Right. Yeah, and by not wanting to go there is actually denying what's actually happening in the world and not taking responsibility, because every single one of us alive on the planet right now is responsible for all the genocides that are happening all over the world. We're all responsible. And by saying it's not me, it was not my ancestors, I have nothing to do with it, you are actually being violent. Because by not calling something out, by gaslighting something that's really in front of your face, is for me a form of violence. So let's get into what we're going to be offering and what people can expect, who it's for, and why now is the time.
So as the remedy, or like the nectar to the poison of the spiritual bypass that we see happening in New Age spirituality, which is only perpetuating these systems of harm and keeping us disconnected from our roots, disconnected from our DNA, from our ancestral heritage and background, our solution and remedy to that is to work through and process and hold space for the traumas, the challenges, the struggles that our ancestors endured, so that we can start to go from a place of feeling fragmentation to a place of feeling wholeness and completion. And we can start to reclaim and remember our authentic selves, who our souls were before we inherited any sort of intergenerational trauma, before the world imposed any conditioning or programming on us. What is innate to our soul, which is something very big and expansive and liberating to tap into. And a lot of times I've found that this sense of conditioning and programming and trauma from our ancestors sort of clouds that and keeps us small and contains us and holds us back. So it allows you to really expand and open into that. And on the other side of this, part of this work is you're able, like I said, to reclaim your gifts, to understand what you came to this earth to do, what your soul's purpose is, what is unique to you and only you. And the offering that Simran and I are going to be launching is around discussing more in depth, not just in a quick little live, our own personal journeys with this work, how we came to it, how it liberated us, how it helped us, the science of the DNA and how to turn on and off the gene expression, the understanding of your body created this as a coping skill, with the understanding that if your ancestors endured this specific set of circumstances, it is very likely that you will also experience this set of circumstances. So it's a survival and coping mechanism, but it is adaptogenic. So just like it can be activated, it can be deactivated, because we don't need it anymore. It no longer serves us. So we're going to walk through that process scientifically as well to understand that more in depth. Also guiding people through this process of different rituals they can use to connect with their ancestors, to understand what exactly they endured. So journaling is part of that, earth-based rituals, rituals with the 5 elements. So fire, air, water, earth, ether, breath work, meditation, sound healing, sound medicine. And Simran is going to be walking people through a group clearing, like what's coming up for the group that attends this container, which is really beautiful. I've worked with Simran as a client at length. That's actually how we became friends. She's an incredible healer who works with energy healing and helps to get you to a subconscious belief level system. Like, what are your subconscious beliefs, which are very deep? And she gets back to the original root, which is profound. So many revelations and aha moments in my work with her. And then from there, she helps you imprint a new set of beliefs which serve you. And just doing like really deep digging, which is incredible. And essentially our aim is to help you release and clear the trauma and from the past, to integrate it, and then to help reclaim the wisdom and the gifts, and to start learning how you can serve the collective and start to be in community and become that ripple effect and embody this new essence and vibration, essentially. Because the problem is that we come from hyper individualism and modern society in the West, and we're supposed to be moving into more of this mindset of the collective, which is why I keep saying, look to the indigenous for the example, look to the indigenous for the wisdom, because they're the ones that are holding this frequency. They never lost connection with this. They never lost their, reverence for the ancestors or with the earth and earth-based rituals. So we're starting to reclaim a lot of these practices and philosophies that they embody and represent. And we're capable of doing this work. If you're watching this live or the replay, there's a reason, there's a calling. You are being invited on a soul level. And we're really excited to share this work with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you pretty much said it all, Christina. And just a few little notes to say that when we're saying indigenous, it means indigenous to you. And we're going to give you tools on how to connect with your own indigenous roots, because all our different ethnicities will have a little bit different emphasis on certain things, and we want you really to use these tools, make them your own. It's not us saying this is the way you do it, and this is really important because it's about you empowering yourself and you knowing what is good for you, rather than us telling you this is the formula, because there's no such thing as a formula. And you have come into this world with very unique gifts, skills, abilities, and unique soul lessons that is going to be unlike anyone else's journey. So we're going to teach you how to tap into that for yourself. We're going to obviously talk about general themes in the collective. And what we want you to go away with is for you to feel more in aligned with your soul, to integrate your mind, which is important, with your body, which has really been, I would say, put to the side, oppressed, colonized. So coming back to earth, body grounding, to allow the mother to nurture you so that you're really whole. Your masculine and feminine are integrated, your mind, body, soul are integrated, that you are more in harmony with not just yourself, but also your family, your surroundings, your institutions, and also how you can be the catalyst for change within any institution, family, constellation system that you find yourself in. And as Christina says, there's always going to be someone in the family who might be a black sheep, but actually is the gift in that family, to really reclaim the gifts for that family so that they can create that ripple effect and pass it on. Because as Christine has said, this is not about us doing healing just for ourselves, but as we do the healing for ourselves, that will automatically ripple out into the collective. And it's needed at this time just because we're at this pivotal time in history where we are in war, where there's a lot of lack consciousness around, and we need to connect with the abundance in spirit, the abundance actually of Gaia, the abundance that is always around us, that we're currently being distracted from. So we're going to help you unravel, untie, decondition from all the systems of oppression and all the separation that has been falsely imposed, so that you can see through it, so that you can reclaim yourself. So Christina, where can people get information and when is this happening?
We are going to be announcing our dates regarding our offering within the next couple weeks. So just stay tuned with our Instagram stories. Follow Simran. Her handle will be tagged here if you're not following her already. And we're going to plan to have a couple different Instagram lives in the meantime to continue this conversation. If you guys have any questions about this work or this offering, please do not hesitate to DM either myself or Simran. You can also email us. I believe both of us have our email readily available in our link in bio on our Instagram profile. And I also just wanted to say one thing that came to me is that I've had people contact me that were adopted and have asked, like, how am I going to do this work? I don't actually know who my ancestors were. And that's fine, even if you don't cognitively know, where you originate from or what tribe you belonged to. These ancient codes are still very much alive in two places: in your DNA, in your body, but also in your heart and in your soul. And it's information you can tap on and activate. I, as well as Simran and many others I know, are living proof of that, because I'm someone that was raised outside my ancestral lands and disconnected with my roots for many, many years. So even if you don't know who your ancestors are, they very much know who you are and are very much waiting to guide you every step of the way. And they have been guiding you, even if you're not aware of it. And they're waiting for you to reestablish connection with them. So we're looking forward to inviting you to begin this journey. And we'll be sharing during our offering tools and rituals that you can practice on your own at home. So this becomes very much a part of your own work on a regular basis, not just when you're in the container with us, because it's an ongoing process. You get to slowly unravel like a spool, and then you take that thread and you weave it into the loom of your life and start to repair anything that's been frayed within this loom. So it's really beautiful work. And stay tuned for our next Instagram live on this and for when we announce our date for the offering, because we're still deciding.
Thank you so much, Christina. What a joy to do this with you today. And yes, we said we're super looking forward to hearing from you. If you have questions, comments on anything we've said, whether you agree, whether you disagree, we'd love to hear from you. We're not saying we have the answers to everything. We'd love to talk about things that are coming up in your life so we can address them in our next live. And yeah, so we're looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible and wishing you a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Imran, for joining. It was such a pleasure to connect with you, and
Thank you.
love you so much.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.